series today, our athlete hangout series, and we got a great athlete for you to chat with today. Talking live with Darbi Roberts, professional triathlete. Darby, how you doing this morning?
Great.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And, Darby, we're talking to you here today because you're coming off a huge breakthrough performance for yourself at Ironman Arizona last week, a big PR. You finished fourth female overall. How are you feeling? A little less than a week later, how does the body feel? How does your mind feel? How's everything going?
Mine feels great. Yeah, it was just a great day, great accomplishment. Really feeling good about the race. Body's getting there. Still a little tired, fatigued, but not too sore anymore. That's mostly gone. Done a lot of Epsom salt baths and stretching and that sort of stuff. So
awesome. And Darby, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on here is you're also one of the increasing, I guess, number of triathletes who are experimenting with this concept of metabolic efficiency training, which is really teaching your body to be more efficient, to better utilize fat stores. And I'm not going to totally give everything away, but you were really able to get through your Ironman and perform at a high level on far fewer calories than people would typically think an Ironman athlete needs. So I'm going to tease that out, and we'll talk more specifics about that in a few minutes. But before we get into all of that, just a little background on yourself. Being a pro triathlete, how did this all come about? How did you get involved in this crazy world of long course triathlon?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I started my very first triathlon. Funny story, try not to make it too long. My very first triathlon was in 2008 when I lived in the Middle East in Doha, Qatar, and I was the only female entrant. And of course I won my age division, which was great. But it was on like an old beater, like commuter steel frame bike. There wasn't very many options when I was living there. Now there's tons, Ironman's expanded to the Middle East, but my first real delve into it was in 2010 when I moved to New York and started competing with the Columbia Triathlon team. And just kind of, started off with Olympics and sprints and then built my way slowly up to half Ironmans. My first Ironman was in 2012. Yeah, that's right. My first Ironman was 2012 and made it to Kona on my first try, which was awesome. And just kept doing it in 2013. And that's when I joined the team that I train with now, which is Tri by 3. And after another really successful season, decided maybe a little bit too quick, but I was happy. I mean, I'm glad I made the decision. Went pro in 2014. So, and then obviously was racing in 2015 as a pro as well. I've been a swimmer all my life, and so that was kind of my first love. Have done a bunch of other sports, including rowing and rugby and soccer and everything. But the long distance cycling definitely came in when I lived in the Middle East, as well as running, and just kind of, I don't know, it kind of all came together when I moved to New York because there were just so many options for it here. So
this performance for you at Ironman Arizona, finishing fourth overall, fourth female overall, would you characterize this as a breakthrough performance for yourself? Is this something that you felt like you had in you going into the race, or are you sitting here today being like, wow, did that really just happen?
Yeah, the latter, definitely. There were a lot of really amazing competitors at the race, including several top 10 finishers at Kona just this year, including Michelle Vesterby. And I mean, Meredith Kuzler had a bad day, but she's a phenomenal athlete either way. And Amanda Stevens and Julia Gayer and a ton of, Laura Wassner, who's also a local athlete. She's fantastic as well. Sarah Haskins, who's an Olympian. So I just didn't know what to expect. And I knew for me, I was going to have a good day because the weather was supposed to be cool. It's in a dry climate. Even though it rained, it was still somehow not humid because it's Arizona. But I knew that for me, I had a lot of fitness. The fourth place was surprising to me. And particularly the amount of time. I had an 18-minute PR, which was extremely surprising to me because I just didn't, I guess I'm still getting used to myself as being a pro triathlete. And so in my mind, 9:05 is something that only full-time pro triathletes are capable of doing. But I pulled it out somehow. So.
Well, you referenced that, Darby, full-time pro triathlete. So, personally, I don't want to blow up your spot too much, but you're at work right now. What do you do outside of triathlon to keep yourself busy?
A lot. I have a 9 to 5 job at Columbia University. I'm an assistant dean of student affairs at the School of International and Public Affairs. And I also am hopefully in my last year of being a doctoral student at Teachers College. So I'm currently in the process of writing a dissertation, but I also coach other triathletes and do all the training. So that's pretty much it in my life, plus my husband, who just happens to do all of those things with me, which is really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your husband, Tyler, like you mentioned, it's good to have that training partner. And I know you said he was along being your Sherpa for the race, which must have been really cool too. So, having a busy schedule, like we're going to certainly talk about efficiency when it comes to nutrition, but how much just overall do you, subscribe to that theory even of training efficiency? Are you somebody that's really, because you're squeezing in your training in between so many other things, really kind of subscribe to that less is more approach, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. So my coach is Greg Close, and his coach is Bob Seebahar. So I have a direct line straight to the source of metabolic efficiency right there. And so I've read Bob's book, and I've learned a lot from Greg as well, in terms of how to manage things. And I've kind of figured out what works and doesn't work for me as well. And there's some things when I cut them out of my diet that it hurts. And, there are other things that I don't miss. And so I do have a no grain diet. I try to limit the amount of added sugar in my diet. I went from I've always been a coffee drinker. I used to drink it with sugar. Now I don't. And I really don't have, I eat, simple things like eating plain yogurt instead of yogurt with added fruit in it, or flavoring, or something like that. So I do follow on the high fat diet. So in terms of my macronutrient, on a macro scale, I'm about 25, 25, 50 in terms of the percentage of calories that come from each one: 25 protein, 25 carbs, and then 50 of fat. So I do follow that lifestyle, and mostly because I think, since a lot of the women that I compete against are training 30 hours a week, and I only train up to 20, nutrition is super important for me. And the metabolic efficiency piece is incredibly important, because that's my way of sort of keeping up with the fact that they're putting in more hours, because I need to have an edge, and that's basically my edge.
So with metabolic efficiency, you kind of described it a little bit, but Bob Seebahar, sport dietitian out in Colorado, really kind of at the forefront of this nutrition concept, where it's kind of changing the paradigm in endurance sports. We've always thought about carbohydrates and simple carbs and sugars as kind of being the lifeblood of what fuels an endurance athlete. And I'm curious, I'm sure you also have experimented with that and probably came up doing that with metabolic efficiency. Now it's all about controlling your blood sugar and getting your body to better utilize fat, so you're not reliant on as many outside calories and simple carbs and sugars. Take me through kind of your evolution in terms of fueling as a triathlete. When you were first coming up in the sport for long course triathlete, excuse me, how are you fueling, a long workout, and what did you think you needed?
Sure. Yeah. I would take as many for workouts, in terms of, I would take as many sugary gels and bars and sports drinks and that sort of stuff. And I think I learned pretty quickly that Gatorade did not do it for me, just because I didn't particularly enjoy it. And as I was as a kid, when I was swimming, power bars were the thing. Those sorry, I won't talk too poorly about it, but I was turned off from power bars as a kid, because I ate them so much, because I was going from soccer practice to swimming practice in one day. And so it was just kind of like my modus operandi, that and goldfish for whatever reason. But in triathlon, I would say, definitely stuck with, gels and blocks and sugary drinks. And, listen, my first Ironman was at Ironman Louisville. It was a 10-12. which is fast for an amateur, especially my first time, and I didn't do it on a particularly fantastic bike either. And I didn't have like race wheels or anything like that. So I was, totally brand new to the sport. And I got through and I was okay, but my marathon always really, really suffered. And I think it was because I just hit a wall nutritionally and physically. I mean, everything else is going on as well. But, it just wasn't, I'd have stomach cramps, and there was always a point at the end of the bike where I just felt kind of sick to my stomach and wasn't able to, that was the thing that I was dealing with, not the fact that I was trying to push through leg pain or something like that. It was, can I make it through because I'm having digestion issues right now. And it was always a struggle, but I never knew anything else, because you just had to do that, because that was, what I was told. All the articles you read say, formulas of, well, you're burning this many calories and your body can store 2,000. So this is how many you have to consume in order to make it through this long of a race, and blah, blah, and so it was always, that was definitely a point of stress for me in terms of trying to figure out, okay, can I make it through this race? Am I hitting my nutritional points? And if I wasn't, then both mentally and physically, I was off, because I would know to myself, oh gosh, I'm not eating enough calories now, I'm going to really suffer on the run. Or, physically, I actually was not getting enough calories, so that was sort of the beginning. And over time, I've, experimented with a few different things, but nothing really seemed to, I think I got sort of a good idea of how to do it. But then, once I joined Try by 3, and once Greg started coaching me, I started dabbling with UCAN, and didn't really trust it at first because I wasn't really sure about it. And it to me, I was like all the skeptics, just doesn't sound right. But over time, especially, I started using UCAN, and I wasn't on the whole metabolic efficiency plan when I first started using UCAN. But then I sort of realized that as a pro, like I was saying earlier, that I needed a game changer for me, and the nutritional piece off the course was a game changer. And so that's when I really took it hook, line, and sinker. And it's just completely, it's to the point where I don't have to worry about it. Not only do I trust that it's going to work, but I don't even have to think about it, because I just know exactly when I need to eat what, and it's simple and it's straightforward, and it's like autopilot.
So, I think, without spending too much more time on what you used to do, I think one last thing to follow up on that is, were you somebody that would, in the past, kind of calculate, I need to try to get in around this many calories per hour? And if so, when you were following that old school approach, what was kind of the range you would shoot for?
I don't think I ever really figured out the right ratio for me, just because I never had a great race where I felt awesome in the stomach area. So I think it was probably 200 to 250. On the run, it was usually a gel every 20 minutes, which is, basically 300 at that point. That's a lot. On the bike, I honestly don't even remember, but I know it was up there.
Yeah. So, and that's, what you're saying is like you said, pretty typical of what you read in the literature, and, what a lot of people are trying to get in. So I'll let you spill the beans. What did you, caloric intake wise, what did you do this time out at Ironman Arizona to, as you fueled yourself to that I think it was 9:05:10. Was that your official time? Yeah. So what did you do in terms of caloric intake?
Sure. So, to start the day off, I had about a 500-calorie breakfast, which involved my favorite recent discovery, which is a pumpkin UCAN smoothie. It's about a half a cup of pumpkin, a scoop of chocolate protein, a scoop of peanut butter, and then milk. And it just, I don't know, I really love it, and my stomach likes it. And so I had that, and then I had like a protein bar. It was about 200 calories. So altogether, that was about 500, maybe 600 calories. And I had that 2 hours, let's think, I went off at 6:45. So I had that about 4:45. So 2 hours beforehand, which usually I'm okay with, and sip some water and coffee throughout the morning. and then got in the water, of course, and didn't have anything right beforehand because I find that it doesn't really settle very well with me. I can't like have a last minute topper like a lot of people do. But had 2 bottles on the bike, each with about 3 scoops of orange. The scoops, not the packets, of the tropical orange UCAN, which is about 240 calories per bottle or so. And it was super thick, but that's okay because then what I do is I just drink water to thirst, and I'll like have a sip of the UCAN and then wash it down with water, so I can get a lot of calories in one gulp without filling my stomach with liquid, which is part of what I have an issue with. And so, like clockwork, basically, I made sure that I was done with my first bottle by 56 miles in, and then I was done with my second bottle early, about with maybe 5 to 10 miles to go. And then in transition, I have one small, like 3-ounce gel flask filled with another 2 scoops of very thick tropical orange UCAN, and would sort of sip on that. I would either do smaller sips or like one big gulp, and periodized over a couple of different aid stations, and would alternate that with just normal water. Make sure I finished that by mile 10 or so, and then I'd pick up another one exactly like it in my special needs, in addition to a handheld water bottle that I filled with a mixture of coconut water and the hydrate berry. So it's because I find coconut water doesn't have quite enough sodium in it. And so the hydrate nicely complements that. And so tried to suck down as much of the hydrate mix as possible, and then kept doing what I was doing previously in the first half with the super thick tropical orange, and never took, didn't even need any bay salt. It was a cooler day. So, if it's a hotter day, I might consider doing like salts or something like that. But because it wasn't, I didn't need that, but literally didn't take anything but water from the aid stations.
But I thought you didn't take any gels, you didn't take any Gatorade, no Coke, but you finished 4th. How's that possible? I didn't think you could do that. That's not what we read. So, I'm obviously saying that jokingly, Darby, but in calculating out what you're saying in terms of nutrition, we're really looking at about 500 to 600 calories for breakfast and about an additional 800 or so calories throughout the race, and that's it. Am I accurate with that calculation?
Yeah, that's correct.
So just to show folks what exactly we're talking about here, we're talking about this. This is the tropical orange UCAN that you're talking about using, and I don't know how well folks are going to be able to see if I can flip it around to the as I very awkwardly try to position this in front of the camera, but yeah, that's not going to work well. But anyway, 80 calories in a scoop, and this is the carbohydrate with the super starch, which is the unique carbohydrate in UCAN. This is the fuel product. So the idea, as Darby's sort of explained what she did, the idea with the super starch is that it's going to be a much slower and steadier release of carbohydrate than you're going to get from your typical drinks or gels or chews with maltodextrin, which is more fast acting. So with super starch, you're really, and especially if you're training your body with that metabolic efficiency training like Darby's been doing, and teaching your body to better burn fat, UCAN kind of fits perfectly into that mold. It's giving you a slow release of carbohydrate, but it's also allowing you to tap into your fat stores. One of the things that I thought was interesting that you mentioned, which I think is such a good point, is because of the characteristics of super starch, because it's a very large molecule and it's not going to sit in your gut like simple sugars, you can mix it up like you talked about. You can mix it up really thick and kind of slam it down, and there's no amount of fluid that you need to aid digestion. Can you just speak to that? Like when you have that really thick serving of UCAN, what's the impact on the stomach when you're mixing it with that little water?
None. Less than if it were super, diluted, in my estimation. I mean, the less liquid in my stomach, the better, because it just feels gross when you're running and it's sloshing around and you feel heavy, and it's just not pleasant. And so for me, it feels great. I feel like I didn't even really eat anything.
Definitely. And then the product you were mentioning, mixing with coconut water towards the end, that's the UCAN hydrate right here. So this is just a you were using the berry flavor. It's just a, excuse me, I'm not getting emotional here, I promise. It's just a little tickle in my throat. So you were using this berry flavor, which is, it's got about 350 milligrams of sodium, 100 milligrams of potassium, and 50 milligrams of magnesium. So like you talked about, there's no calories in this. That was purely for salts, for electrolytes, to stay hydrated, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, with that, Darby, one of the things that I think is great that you pointed out is really, even though the UCAN Super Starch is a drink, it's a powder you mix with water, you're not treating it like hydration, right? You're treating it almost like food. And then you alluded to the fact that you were hydrating separately. Is that something that you figured out right away? Or is that something where as you train with it more and more, you said like, hey, let me tweak this. This is what works for me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, part of the problem is figuring out, okay, how much can I carry on me on the bike? Because you've only got so much space to put liquids, right, on your bike. And I don't like having to stop for, I don't like having to stop for your special needs bag, but also I can't really pick up much at the aid stations because they only have water. And I would pick up water, but I don't want to refuel with Gatorade at the aid stations because that basically undoes everything that I'm trying to do with the UCAN. And so part of it was logistics. It's just easier to make it thicker so you can carry everything on you at all times. But also, over the course of using the product, I'd kind of realize, it's thick even if you dilute it, and to be able to get in to be able to make it a hydrating sort of drink, you end up having to dilute it and then carry a ton on you, and so that just didn't make sense. And it makes a lot more sense to treat it like you said, as your food. You're only really trying to get in the calories by drinking that, and then having something totally separate to hydrate, because I would need the hydration separate anyway to sort of wash down the UCAN regardless of how thick it was. And it's just much easier to do it that way. So
with you, Darby, you've kind of bought in now, at least in this training cycle, kind of full on to the approach, in terms of the daily nutrition. Like your daily nutrition is certainly supporting you being able to do what you did. In terms of minimal caloric intake during the race. Is this the first time you feel like you fully trusted it and were confident going into it, or have you experienced that, in your past few races? I'm curious to like, there's a breakthrough performance with time. Do you feel like in any way this was kind of a breakthrough for you, knowing this type of fueling is something that can fuel you to a high level?
Somewhat. I mean, I've been using it enough that I was comfortable with it, and certainly Ironman Barcelona last year went really well. Other than the fact that I crashed my bike, but that was a different story. Nutritionally, last year worked fine. It was not. I mean, that was still a PR race for me. That was a 9:23, and I felt really good about the race, except for the fact that I was in like serious pain from having crashed my bike. But I trusted the nutrition part of it. Well, I learned to trust the nutrition part of it last year at that race, because that was the first time I was doing a whole Ironman only on UCAN, and it worked well. In terms of, but I think I learned that last year, whereas I really honed it in this time, and trusted it such that I didn't have to think about it, because when you're in the middle of an Ironman, you're thinking about, oh gosh, who's in front of me, who's behind me, what are my legs feeling like? There's so much other stuff that's going on in your head that having to think about nutrition is really distracting. And I think that because I learned to trust it last time, I didn't have to think about it this time. And it was autopilot. I was completely on autopilot the whole time in terms of the nutrition aspect, such that I could focus on other things that were more important, like the race itself.
There's maybe the numbers increasing, but not a lot of pros probably still that are doing what you're doing. What's your sense of kind of the evolution of the way people look at fueling? There's an interesting study that's come out recently that was conducted by Dr. Jeff Volek, a low carb study on endurance athletes, and really talking about comparing two sets, high carb endurance athletes and lower carb. I think something like they were only eating 19% of their diet as carbs, and showing that the fat burning capability and even the potential to store glycogen in these low carb athletes is very, very high compared to these higher carb, or I should say the potential to store glycogen is the same as somebody eating a lot of carbs, but the ability to burn fat is much, much better in these low carb athletes. So there's more and more supporting research, coming out. There's experiences like yourselves, but what's your sense overall of like still how novel your approach is? Do you feel like you're an outlier in the pro world?
I think so. I think there's still a lot of people that, in all areas, but in pros as well. I mean, obviously, if you're, if you've dialed in something that I guess you think works for you, then maybe there's no reason to switch, especially if you're performing. And I think that's part of it, is that people are like, well, I'm performing at such a high level, and I'm still doing that with this diet, and with a high carb diet and with a high carb fueling plan, then maybe they just don't think that they need to change. But it'd be interesting to see what would happen if they did, because maybe you'd see all of these, given that it made such a difference for me, maybe you'd all of a sudden see all these pro women breaking 8 hours. No, not really, but I mean, it'd be interesting to see what happens, because if it really does catch on, I mean, maybe and not necessarily it's going to make them faster, but it's going to reduce the number of bad days. That's for sure. Because usually you have a bad day either because you're hurt, you have a bike mechanic issues, or because you have bad nutrition. And so the number of times people call it quits because of bad nutrition probably would reduce significantly. But, people probably just don't think they need to change, I guess.
Yeah, and then I think that's a great point. Like you said, one of the things you were talking about is not worrying about your nutrition. So it's just like, whether or not it's going to be the sole thing that makes you faster, if it can, contribute to less GI distress, if it's making you mentally sharper because it's one less thing to think about, those all, can affect the performance. The last thing I'll close this out on for you, Darby, is, you have, I guess, the unique perspective of, being a pro. So you have some insight into the pro mindset, but you're also a coach and work with, age group athletes. So you have that kind of perspective as well. What do you see as the benefit of this approach, just to the everyday age group athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have some athletes that use it and some that don't. And I think for those who use it, it's the people who have had somewhat similar stories to me, which is that they've never really been able to figure out the nutrition issue, the nutrition piece, or they've had a history of GI issues, and so are kind of fed up with dealing with the goos and gels, or they're just quite frankly sick of them. And so this is a great alternative to all of those things, not just because it's an alternative, but because it's an alternative that works. And I would say that more than physical limitations for most age groupers, it's nutritional, because they're not doing. I don't necessarily expect that all my athletes are going to do the whole no grain complete metabolic efficiency change, but certainly there are so many unknowns in the Ironman, especially in the Ironman distance and the half Ironman as well. But there's so many unknowns and so many things going on, more so for age groupers even than pros, because we have a pretty plush experience in Ironman, in terms of getting a good, being treated well and going out first and not having to deal with droves of people and, the logistics of everything. That I think that for age groupers, it's almost more advantageous for them, because it really does take out one very serious source of anxiety, both because it's a real anxiety, or because it's a real issue, or even if it's not a real issue, it's just one more thing you have to think about. And it's easy to use that as a way to reduce stress. So
Yeah, it's a great perspective. I really enjoyed this, Darby. It's really great to talk to you, pick your brain about some of these stuff. What's up next for you?
The off season. I don't know. I got to figure out what I'm going to be doing next season. I think I'm going to try to hit up maybe a half in March, but definitely shooting for Kona for next year. So got a good start to the Kona points campaign, but I got to figure out which races are best for me to follow through with that. So.
Awesome. Well, some well-deserved rest and relaxation. I hope you get to celebrate a great breakthrough performance. And are you, if people want to kind of follow you or learn more about what you're doing, or even, I don't know if you have any slots for coaching, what's the best way people can sort of connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that sort of stuff. But I do have my own blog that I keep that's not as as recently updated as it could be. But also you can find me on tryby3.com. I'm one of the coaches listed there, and we're always taking on new athletes. So either email me or Greg, the other the owner and head coach of Tryby3, and we'll connect. So.
That is triby3.com, located in Brooklyn, New York. Actually, just about a block and a half from where I'm sitting in Brooklyn as well.
You're closer than I am.
That's right. We are neighbors. Well, that's awesome, Darby. Thanks so much. Again, a huge congrats to you. And for the UCAN related stuff that Darby was talking about, GenerationUCAN.com. You can find a ton more information, athlete stories. But really great to hear your perspective, Darby, and enjoy the holidays. Well deserved.
Thanks. You too.
All righty. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.